Hey, what's up, friends? Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, episode number 8, Marc McClusky. Now, what I love about Marc is he's a punker at heart. He's worked with Bad Religion, Ludo, Motion City Soundtrack, Weezer, and then eventually started to get into composing. He got things in Super Bowl ads, car commercials. To me, that's just crazy. He is a wealth of knowledge. So what we're going to do is we're going to step inside the brain of Marc McClusky right now in episode number 8. Let's dive in. So, Marc, if I look at your all music, your bio, your credits, so like you've got a couple of platinum, gold records, multiple top 5 Billboard albums. You've worked with Weezer. You got Bad Religion, Motion City Soundtrack, Social Distortion. You've gone into composing. If I were to rewind and let's go to like young Marc, who is suddenly intrigued with the idea of music and recording. What was that journey or kind of that realization of music, something you listened to eventually like, this is my career. This is what I want to do. Was there like a moment where you were like, I want to get into this shit?
I mean, I know this sounds so stupid. I don't think I had a choice in doing anything else. And it was not even a thought of an inkling of like, oh, I wonder if I could do this. It was just kind of like, as far as I can remember, any allowance I had that my mom or dad would give me, I would buy records, like literally vinyl, right? Because it was the 80s for me. So it was like, I would just spend my weekly or monthly allowance on music. And all my friends would buy like toys and stuff. You know what I mean? So it's like, for me, I never thought about anything else. And I never even thought to do this for a job. I just liked it. And that's it. Like, you know what I mean? It was never like, oh, I want to do music for a job. Like, job never came into my head. It was just like, I like making music, or I like being involved in music, and I'm just going to do that. So that's kind of like what I did. But so when I was like a little kid, I remember once we got to band age, I think it was like 6 or 6 or 7. I had to be. So like when you got to pick band at school, like Huey Lewis and the News was my favorite band at that time. So I wanted to play saxophone. And it was the 80s, so everybody wanted to play saxophone. So wherever I was in the line, all the saxophone players had been taken. So I got put on clarinet. So I started on clarinet. And I always loved, ever since I was a little kid, the first time I ever heard Gershwin Rhapsody in Blue, it made me feel some type of way, as people say. And, it has a really wonderful clarinet, beautiful line in it. And I don't know, that spoke to me a lot. And then, so I did that. And then I moved over to saxophone eventually. Then I started playing percussion. And then little instruments here and there. I got into high school jazz band and stuff where I was playing drums at that point. And I was a skate rat punk dude. And this is before skateboarding was cool. And punk was cool. And I would buy these, skateboarding videos with like Pal Peralta videos and whatever else was going. New Deal, I remember, was a company that I really liked a lot. And like all the skate videos would have really, really cool vibey hip hop and or punk rock. So like I discovered like the Descendants through these skateboarding videos and Metallica and other heavier genres of music. And I really liked the energy and the grit that was in that style of music. I really enjoy intensity, and that doesn't have to always necessarily mean loud, right? You can have the most intensely quiet thing you've ever heard. So I just really liked the grit and intensity in that style of music. So I started writing my own songs when I was probably about 11 or 12. And then I started to think, well, I'm writing these songs. I'd love to hear what they sound like. So I had this crappy old, I think it was a PA that had like, I don't remember, 4 or 8 inputs. And it was, really just crap. And I took my mom's Sony boombox that had RCA inputs in the back, and I took the PA RCA outs, fed it into the inputs of the boombox, and then whatever mics we had laying around or could borrow from friends, I would like put mics on, my drum kit and our guitarist's guitar and the bass. Or if we didn't have enough mics, I would put one mic in the room and move it around until I got a good capture of everything. So then what I would do is have the PA feeding the boombox, hit record on the boombox. I would record one of our songs. I would listen back and go, oh man, like the guitars don't sound right. I need to move the mic. And then we would record it again and then record it again. And I would just keep moving things until I got it to sound right through this really crappy setup.
That is some MacGyver shit right there.
Yeah.
That is so cool that it's just like, even like there's two things that I think are really good. When you were talking about intense doesn't have to mean loud, which is just a really cool reference to just like you thinking about dynamics already. You just being aware of like the feel doesn't mean, loud isn't necessarily intense. You could still have intense,
exactly,
but like tension, quiet. But even just the idea of you recording your songs and thinking to yourself, I need to move the mic. Like it's not the tone that I want. It's almost like you had something in your head that you knew that you could achieve. And you were like, until I move, that's it right there. I got to remember that position. That is so cool.
When people like ask me about like, how do you know when it's done, or how do you start, or how do you do anything, right? I always tell them the same thing. I did a thing for Berkeley last week for one of their scoring online classes. And the teacher and I became friends, and he invited me in to talk about like mixing. And they asked the same thing, and it was an original composition that I wrote for this video game trailer like a few weeks ago that I was showing them, and they were like, "Well, how do you?" So when you write, again, if like people don't know, they're not aware. When you write for like an orchestra or anything, you start with a piano sketch, right? So it's like everything just starts on a piano, and then you explode it out into an orchestration after that. So they're like, well, from your piano sketch, how do you make all these decisions? And I go, when I'm writing the piano sketch, I already hear the song in my head, or the orchestration or whatever I'm creating in my head, and I don't stop until I get to that moment where I can fulfill that outline, right? So the point of all that is, if you don't know what you're trying to create, then you're not really creating anything. You're just kind of fucking around, right? So you have to have the idea before you even, this is something I see people do all the time, especially with samples today, is they're like going to write a song, and then for 30 minutes they're clicking through kick drum sounds or snare sounds, and you're just like, dude, you haven't even written a song yet. Like, write the song, and then the song will tell you what you want to express tonally, right? So it's like everybody's doing it, in my opinion at least, backwards. Is like, if you don't know what you're making, what are you're just kind of like looking for a kick drum sound that exists in a vacuum. Like, it doesn't have any relationship to anything else that's happening in the song.
Oh, do you feel like that's maybe how you're saying, like, sometimes people are working backwards and they're wondering why did they get stuck and they're going in these circles? Do you think sometimes like artists or songwriters that are writing the song are not giving thought to the song, and like it's the same concept? They're not thinking about it clearly. They're kind of going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, well, I think people are obsessed with production and they're not obsessed with songwriting, and songwriting will trump the production every time. I mean, you can always argue like, this song doesn't mean anything, but the production's great. And it's like, yeah, exactly. Like, it might grab you and you might listen to it and it's interesting to hear, but the longevity of it won't last, right? So it's like, you can sing Star Wars right now, right? And it's great. You don't have to have the orchestra there, right? The melody is just so good. It expresses a feeling, and then everything else is supportive, right? All the orchestra, the entire 60 people that were playing that is only supporting the actual few notes, whatever that is, 8 notes, 7 notes of that melody line. And that melody line is so powerful that all the other people complement it, and that's why it becomes great. Just like, like Queen, or, it doesn't even have to be Queen. Like, it doesn't even have to be these complex harmonic harmonically complex things. It can be Green Day. You know what I mean? It can be
Hmm.
something, as long as the melody is sincere, the you believe the singer, right? And everything else is supportive, and that's it. It's like you got to have that root thing, at least in my opinion. You got to have that one thing first, and then everything else will come quite easily. I'd imagine, because you're actually feeling something at that point, right? And then now all you have to do is express your emotion in a tonal palette of color.
Now, as a producer, from what you're describing, do you feel like when a band, when they say, "Hey, I've got these songs and they're great and they're awesome," do you feel like sometimes I like to think you have almost like a bullshit detector when it's just like this doesn't feel authentic? How do you
Yeah,
can, kind of say to them in the nicest way like, "Hey, this is good, but I think we can delve a little bit deeper, a little bit better. We can find some better
right.
songs."
Everybody has it's their own metric or pendulum of what they can accept as good or bad, right? So I can't tell an 18-year-old artist that, or 20-year-old artist, right, that is at the beginnings of their career, that I don't think their song is good enough where they might believe like it's the best song they've ever written, right? So on that side of it, I can't tell somebody if their song sucks or not. What I can do is take what they're giving me and then nudge it and go, oh, maybe we phrase this a little differently like this, or maybe this chord sequence might be a little bit. I don't want to say better because it's not better. It's all subjective. Music is subjective.
Hmm.
That's the beauty about it. Not better. Here's an alternate way to think about this, and then, or if the song has, this song, you listen to it and everybody feels the same way. It has these certain challenges. How do we overcome those challenges? You present options, right? Like when I was younger, and everybody has ego, right? That's what drives somebody. When I was younger, I wouldn't deal with any of that shit. I would be like, all right, you got to change this, you got to change this, and you got to change this because everything else is just bullshit. And we're going to do it. And if you're not going to play it right, then I'm going to play it right, and I'll call you when it's done to come sing it. Right? That's the way I used to be.
Yeah.
Now I'm an old man, or becoming an old man, where I'm more in a nurturing side of my personality. So I present options, but they have to live their choice, right? And their choice might be stick with their guns and don't listen to me, and they might be right. Or their choice might be listen to me, and that's right. Whatever it is, it is. But I'm more try to present options instead of telling them what I firmly believe is wrong, right or wrong, because it's all subjective. It doesn't matter. It's whoever the eye is sitting in. That's where they'll see the beauty in it or not.
Like as you were growing as a producer, a mixer, did you have someone who was kind of like that, mentoring you on that side of just being like, "Hey, here are the other options," that kind of like shifted your perspective from the guy being like, "Hey, it's got to be this. If not, get out. I'm going to do it," to eventually being like, "Huh." And then that started unlocking better things in your recordings and the mixing?
So again, the term better, right?
Yeah.
It's always subjective. There's no such
Okay.
thing as better or worse. But so I worked with a band called Ludo, who are crazy talented. So we did demos or an EP that got them signed to Island Def Jam. And
Hmm.
then when it came time to make the record, I hadn't had any large successes at that point. So I was like 26 or 27. And that's when I was in my very much give me the guitar phase, I'll call you when it's done phase. And Matt Wallace got to do the record. So Matt called Island Def Jam, and there was some songs that we had already done. He was like, I don't need to redo these; these are great. So that's how Matt Wallace and I became buddies. So I eventually moved out to Los Angeles, and I put my studio right next to Matt, and he mentored me for those few years that I was out there, and it was more of like how he approaches things is much more in the nurturing and lets the band figure things out. At least that's what I observed.
Hmm.
Instead of me, and me being, I'm going to figure this out for you, and this is how you're going to do it. Now, he, I would observe him in those situations, and that's sort of where I saw a different perspective. And now it's very much, I can appreciate that side of it, but I can also appreciate the side that I I have a natural instinct to be. And really, it's up to the band however they want to do it. Because I always have the same talk with the band when we get there. I was like, this is your record, it's not mine, right? So, like, we're going to make whatever you guys want. And I'm here to give you my opinion. And if you want to take it, great. If you don't, no hard feelings. Like, this is an egoless atmosphere. Nobody in the band should not have, the drummer should be able to rate melodies if they're great, and they inspire people. The
Mm-hmm.
guitarist should be able to write drum parts if they inspire people. Like, there's no ego. Nobody's better or worse than anybody else. We're just here to all make something really great and be creative together. So let's do that in a really fun and encouraging environment. So that I had Brett Gerwitz that managed me for about a year and a half when I was living in Los Angeles, and he mentored me in a different way. Right? Is like he's such a smart dude, and he's been in the business forever, and he knows how to talk to people and be, again, it's more of a nurturing, encouraging thing. But that's the luck I had, right? I got to see older guys that probably went through kind of like what I went through and see how they do things. So I feel very fortunate and lucky to be able to see that perspective.
And your studio was in Sound City, right?
Yeah. So Matt Wallace,
Whew.
yeah, Matt had a Sound City studio, and I when I moved to Los Angeles, he was like, "Yeah, man, put your studio right next to mine. There's an open spot there." So if people don't know, like, Sound City, if they've seen the movie, there's like the main room where everybody talks about, like, where Nirvana and everybody records. But Sound City is literally like a complex of small studios, and where the main studio was there's like this little parking lot. My studio was directly across the parking lot, so whenever you go do drums or bigger sessions, you just walk across the parking lot and go record in the A room, and then bring your hard drive back to your studio, and then finish it out, overdubs and all the little stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Sound City's great, man. It's a really, really cool spot.
I mean, that is so cool. Now, in the records that you've made, what's your process when you're thinking about guitar tone? I know it can vary from record to record, but do you have
Mm-hmm.
like things that you think about when you're like, okay, we're getting ready to track guitars? What constitutes for you, like, this is going to make a quality guitar tone?
So I think for me, and again, right, like you said, it depends on the genre, right? If it's like
Yeah.
some quiet thing, you got to get the right atmosphere. If it's like a vibey kind of reverby guitar, you got to find that kind of right area. If it's like a rock and roll or punk thing, for me, it's all about clarity. So it's like, if I can hear the pick hit every string, like that's like a benchmark for me to be like, okay, we got a good sound. Because I'm not a great guitar player, right? Like, I can't shred, but I can play the shit out of some power chords, and I mean that in a very, like, specific way. Like, I'll have to sometimes I'll ask the guitar players to hand me the guitar to play them how I would play it,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people play messy, and I mean messy not as in, like, actually lazy is the word I usually use. They play lazy where if they're playing, they're picking up their hand before they're moving to the next chord, and there's a gap in the music, right? It might be very minuscule, but that gap says to me, oh, I don't believe what I'm doing, because it's like not worth the effort to, like, put in the extra thing to move quicker, to get to the chord, to keep the energy going. And,
Yeah.
like, they don't play hard. So it's like they use gain to like go, like, more distortion to disguise their lack of belief in the riff they're playing. So I like lower gain, because the harder you play, the more gain comes out, which in turn sound has a brighter sound, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
kick drum, right? If you barely tap the kick drum, there's more bass in it. But if you kick it hard, it's a brighter attack, which over time people learn that you could have the same sound at the same volume, right? You could have a kick drum that's barely hit at the same SPL level, same decibel level, as a kick drum that's hit really, really hard. And what are you going to do? You're going to perceive the one that's hit harder as louder, right? Just because you've learned over the course of your life, the harder something's hit, the brighter it becomes. Pianos, everything is like that, right? If you dig into a string instrument more, it gets this brilliance to it. If you play more delicately, it's a softer sound, right? So if you can't bring that texture out in your playing, then how am I as a listener going to believe that, yeah, this is really heavy and really hard? So it's a game of subtleties, man. It's like finding the details in everything and then relating that to how that makes you feel. And that's what music production is. That's why I said earlier is like if you're writing all these kick drums or messing with kick drum and snare sounds, you haven't written the song yet, you don't even know what texture you're trying to create to make someone feel a certain way. It just blows my mind that people do that. I again, like, everybody's different. Some people need to have that to write the lyrics to. I need me and a piano or me and an acoustic guitar to get the feeling down to know what I want to produce.
I couldn't agree more, especially with the kind of sometimes people oversaturate with the distortion, like so much that it's hard to see what's happening. And that when you really dial back, like when I have students or clients, they're talking about like, well, how do I improve this? It's like when you remove the gain, if you can get it to sound kick ass, like really like low distortion, clean, any extra that you're going to add, it's going to sound more badass. And when it comes to the idea of, especially like those subtleties, you said like the transitions are not clean. The idea of like the metronome, getting comfortable with the metronome to the point where you're aware of it, but you're not paranoid by it. Yeah, and I think sometimes people are so paranoid by the metronome because they're like, it's almost like a robotic feel. And the things that you're talking about, like the human feel, like the
ebb and flow.
Yeah, and just like that it has like that authenticity and not like I'm playing to the metronome for the first time. Here we go. It just has just getting rid of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a place to have a click and you're allowed to be free on it, right? Like if it's a chill song, it's kind of nice to actually, it's called, back phrasing, like where you back phrase everything and you just have it fall way behind the beat. It just feels nicer. It's very chill.
So what would be a tip for you if there's someone that's like, I want to get into the idea of recording myself? What are some, I guess, common mistakes some people do when they're starting to do their demos?
Producing it before it's written.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the most common thing I see. Love your idea before you get into the production. I can't emphasize that enough. Like really, you got to have the idea before you go, and don't just go, okay, cool, I got a chorus. Now let's produce the song. Well, you don't have the song yet, so finish the song before you get into the next thing.
So really you're emphasizing you have to have that structure, that skeleton structure, where if they're sitting with you and you're like, cool, how's your song go? They can describe it and play it for you. So you're like, oh, cool. And not just like, well, the verse is still in that. It's like, well, then it's not done yet.
Well, yeah, that I've literally said this a million times, to bands is like, it sounds like we're probably not ready to record yet. So, finish the songs and then let me know when those are done and then we can start the actual recording. Because, there's nothing to record yet. Like, what am I don't know what I'm supposed to record. Like some chords with a rhythm and some na-nas, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a song to me.
I think I heard you explain, it was maybe in a podcast or something, another one, or when I was in an interview, and you were talking about, some bands go into the studio and record the same song many different ways, and then that's very different from making an album. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Oh, yeah. So I think if I know what you're talking about, because I know exactly what I would have said, is so you have a band, right? Like Blink-182 would be a pretty good example, or Fall Out Boy is another really good example, where they have their sound, right? And their sound is limited to, do you know the number system, right? And chords, right? So like a 1-5-6-4. So like if you can do a 1-5-6-4 and your whole record is essentially that 1-5-6-4, right? For 10 different ways on the same idea. It's like, doesn't feel like a record to me, or like a band exploring their creative avenues. It feels like, oh, I really like this one thing and I can't get away from it. So instead of exploring like a different idea or different harmony and different whatever, right? They just write that one song 10 different ways and then they call that a record. Because it's the same emotion over and over and over again.
And do you feel like some bands think, "Oh, that's an album," and you're like, "That's not an album. That's just a collection of that's just you record some songs.
Well,
There's
yeah.
nothing to it." Yeah.
Well, I'm not an elitist, right? I'm never going to judge someone's art, right?
Yeah.
Because they love it, right? So there's merit to that. Like, it's absolutely great. You know, I'm speaking for me is like, I like Ludo. I'll use them as an example because Ludo, I mean, the records that we've done songs that sound like they came from like 1920, where we got this instrument that so we were recording their second album, and Andrew wrote this really cool song that just sounded like, you know, some crooner in the middle of Kentucky singing about you know, his girl or whatever from like 1920 or 1930. So
Mhm.
there's this instrument called an octagon, right? And it's one of the first samplers ever created. It came around, I think, in like the 40s. What it is an optical disc that you slide into this instrument that it has buttons for the chords, and then I think it's only one octave that you can play on top of it, like a melodic line. And those optical records or optical plastic, do you know what I'm talking about? Probably not.
Yeah.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Okay.
I've seen one of them.
Oh, okay, yeah. So they would warp, right? So they would get these like warble effects in it. So we were at the studio, and the studio that was like known for its keyboard collection. I was like, "You guys don't have an Opticon, do you?" They're like, "Yeah," and we used that. But yeah, but so we had a song like that, and then there was like a song like we did like a straight up acoustic country sounding song, and then the next song was like this crazy kind of like swung song called Too Tired to Wink is like this crazy kind of swung Green Day meets Queen. You know, it was just that's the kind of records I like to make because it's like, oh, we're making music. We're not making this one kind of thing over and over again. Like think about Queen,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
Queen made records. They didn't make like like you're my best friend. My best friend sounds nothing like you want to write or I want to ride my bicycle, right? But it's clearly the same band. You know, they don't sound like the same song. The harmony's different. The chord structure is different. The ideas are different. And that's why these bands, like all these bands that have been around, you know, forever are classics, is because they gave enough to the world to like keep them relevant and not even relevant. It's not even relevancy. It's keep them keep their you know, if you only paint within like red, right? If you use all the kind of warm colors, that's the only thing people can get from you. But if you can combine all the colors, right, now you're getting like a big picture where maybe one day you are feeling red, the next day you're feeling blue, and the next day you're feeling orange. If you don't paint with all those colors, there's no reason to go back to you when you're feeling that other way. I don't know how else to say it.
Now, to me, this is a perfect segue. Would you say this is the thing that got you interested in composing? Like, you know, because you are also part of, you worked at Screen Sound Alliance when it
Yeah,
came
so
to composition. Is that just like that experimentation, that idea of like different ways of expressing in different modes and different avenues got you into that?
yeah, that's exactly right. It's like you can only make so many punk records before you're like, all right, I've made punk records. You know, I can remember it was probably 7 years ago now. I I was still making records and doing everything, and I was like, man, I've always loved film composing. Why aren't I doing that? And I was just like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to start to learn, and I'm going to, you know, I went to school for music. I never graduated, but I knew enough to like understand the basic
Mm-hmm.
ideas of how music works. But then, you know, I got more into it and more, you know, just put my head down. I would do score studies. I would just sit there and read the scores. I bought, you know, like Star Wars, E.T., Back to the Future. And I would just read the scores and listen to the music over and over again, right? So you can like just follow the violas, the whole track. Just follow the first violin. Just follow the second violins. Just follow the trombones, and you can listen and hear. And what you're doing, like when you talk about orchestra, you talk about color, right? You can hear the
Mm-hmm.
colors they're making by certain blends and how the harmony works, and see things in that way. So I started doing that, and then as I said, I'm very ambitious. So I kept looking around for ways to get into that industry. And I went to the Natural History Museum to go see the Dark Universe, and I really liked the score for it. So I looked up to see who scored it, and it was this guy named Robert Miller. And then I looked him up and found out he lived in New York. So then I dug further and just happened to find his email and emailed him. And I was just like, hey, I'd love to just take you out to lunch. I'm an aspiring film composer. I'd love to just pick your brain. So we went out to lunch. It was a good experience. An opportunity came up at his company, which was Screen Sound Alliance at the time. We're actually now called Random Order because we joined with a bigger production company. But anyways, so he hired me as a composer, and then that's when I really started to learn a lot from him. And he's been an amazing mentor. His mentor, when he was developing, was Aaron Copland, which is yeah, exactly. So Robert, he's unbelievable at what he does. Unbelievable. So he's been showing me more like sort of intimate tricks and things how to orchestrate and why don't you try this, or he's kind of been really good on that side of things with me. I feel very fortunate again to have a great mentor and just pushing forward. So, but the original, back to the original thing is like, yeah, absolutely. That's totally why I do why I got into film scoring, is to exercise those things, because I don't love punk, I don't love pop, I love music, I love all of it. So I want to make all of it, and that's the best way to do it. And scoring allows.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I just find that interesting because I find the ones that are constantly growing and doing those things chase after the things that just intrigue them. That just and they just kind of and it's not like maybe I'll do this. Well, maybe I'll just try it. I'll dabble it. They just fucking throw themselves into it. And they're like, here we go. But to me, that's so interesting because I think some people are told in art sometimes like, have a plan A, have a plan B, here's your plan C. But how you've described what you've done, you've just delved in fully. You've immersed yourself in it. And just like, here we go, let's figure it out. Let's do it.
Yeah, and again, like going back, like it wasn't a choice. I didn't decide to do this. It's just what I did. If that, I don't know how to say it. It's like I didn't choose music. It's just what I do. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Would you say it's the thing that just intrigues you, and then you just chase after that thought and that process? Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because it's like you didn't start out your interview by saying like, I wanted to make $1 million, Mike, and I wanted to do it. But it was just like, this is the thing that intrigues me and I find it fascinating. And, I get that when you said, you say whatever money you got. I remember just not, using my lunch money in high school because I was like, I'm just going to buy a CD. I'm going to go to a show. And it was just the thing that I just accumulated. And it was like, because music fascinates me. In all different genres. And it's always it's awesome to hear someone else. And I find the people that I've been talking to that say the same thing. I just delved in and did the thing. Like if you're asking me, did I say like, I'm going to be this and write a word of affirmation, like I'm going to be a multi-bill. No, it was just, I chased after what intrigued me. And I still chase after what intrigues me.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get bored and don't let yourself become complacent, because once you start to get that way, right, you probably shouldn't be doing that anymore because it's not your passion.
What projects are you working on now that you're like super excited for?
A couple Kia commercials, another commercial called Optum, a band called Marina City from Chicago, a band called Lost Like Lions from San Francisco, a band called Modern Ties from Scranton, Pennsylvania. And I think that's it right now. A lot.
A lot. It sounds like,
I'm very fortunate.
Are you also a person that just like likes to immerse themselves in work too? Just like, cool, let's do it.
Yeah, because it's not work for me. You know what I mean? It's like I get to wake up every morning and I get to make music and people pay me for that. I mean, like I don't know how much better of a life I could ask for, honestly. And I live in the best city in the world, New York. So come on.
That is fantastic. I love it. Mark, this was awesome. Thanks for taking out the time.
Yeah, thank you,
I
Mike.
loved it. I love this and hope to have you back sometime. I love Mark. The first time I met him, he was running sound at a Punchline taping, and I went up to him and I was like, "Hi, I gave you my audio stems for something I produced. What'd you think of them?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, it was great. I wouldn't say anything. You were fine." And I was like, "Wow, he's very upfront. He's very approachable. And to me, that's why I always love talking with him, because he genuinely enjoys what he does. And his goal is to empower others to let them know that, hey, if you want to do it, guess what? Go do it. And you know what? You can do it. You're a songwriter. You have your guitar, you're writing songs, but sometimes you're stuck in this box of the same thing, which then produces the same song over and over, and it feels like a never-ending trap. Don't worry, you are not alone. And that's why I created the Songwriting for Guitar Insiders. Every month you're going to get a new skill-building module. Every month we're going to meet as a group. So start writing the songs you know you're capable of. Just go to songwritingforguitar.com and click the Insiders group. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. This episode was edited and produced by Chris Fafalius. I'm Mike Byers. Until next time.